Hi there. It's the Lean Into Artcast, the show where a couple visual storytellers take a stab at, punch at. Well, punch. Oh, I don't know if I like that word. How about we take an attempt to grapple with visual storytelling topics, the lifestyle of visual storytelling. How do you communicate ideas visually? What kind of tools do you use? Do you use old tools? Do you use new tools? Do you use software? Do you use hardware? Do you use paper? Do you use digital ink? How do you do it? Well, we think hard about that stuff, so you will too. My name is Jerzy Drozd. I'm a cartoonist and teaching artist. The other guy is...
Hey, I'm Rob Stenzinger, a game designer and UX designer, and storyteller too. So, what's this old technology stuff you're talking about, Jerzy?
Old technology. Yeah, we'll talk more about the actual stuff we make in a later part of the show. But to start with, this whole episode, I mean, as if you didn't know, you downloaded a podcast, you'd click, play on a video. You saw the headline: old gear, open source, new purpose. Keeping stuff alive. I will admit to being the kind of person who, having in the last 5 or 6 years invested a lot of time learning digital illustration techniques. Actually, I should say for the past 20 years I've been doing this, right? Like 1995 is when I first used Photoshop, like professionally. Like I got paid to use Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator. But in the past 5 or so years, I've spent a lot of time learning digital illustration, like actually drawing on tablets and things like that. And I will admit to being the kind of person who is kind of always reading reviews of upcoming and new products. Mobile Tech Review is a website or a YouTube channel that I frequent a lot. And Lisa Gage, the reviewer on that site, is a tech reviewer who is also an artist. So they spend a lot of time exploring, new tech that might be interesting to me. However, there's another part of me, Rob, who gets a little bit frustrated that we're in this like 2-year cycle of everything. Like, oh, your Mac is 5 years old. That's ancient. Your phone is 2 years old. That's so old. Like part of me wants to keep my stuff alive longer because hardware itself isn't damaged, is it? Surely we could keep it running. Surely there's something less wasteful and more economical about that too, right? Like, I
Yeah,
don't like...
possibly. I mean, on the surface, that sounds totally reasonable, but I know that I'm absolutely caught into the fascination with the new, what capabilities are coming around the corner, and having my own like wish list for capabilities that I just want to come about. Like,
Yeah.
There was a time when there wasn't an Apple native way to draw on a screen, right? And that's still not in the main OS. That is in their, the offshoot iOS and on the iPad. But yet, okay, but it's there. And so, I mean, but that's an example of just pining for like, gosh, this needs to be around, and why isn't it? And then, keeping a lookout and trying to work with other tech as a stopgap. And then I don't know. Yeah, it's a treadmill in a way, and I can't complain too much about it. But yet, I do question it, and want to not only be, waiting for the next thing, because yeah, sometimes it's disappointing the life cycle of some hardware, and it's like, well, what can I do about it? And
Yeah, I don't think either of us are going to make the case that one is better than the other, right? Like, oh, it's all open source, all recycled materials, or nothing. Or oh, it's always got to be the newest, shiniest thing. There's some kind of tension and sort of turnover between the two. Like I'm actually talking to you right now. Like the camera I'm looking into is on a 2009 iMac running OS 10.7, right? Um, by current standards, a very old machine, right? But then the machine I draw all of my comics on is I only bought a year ago, right? The VioZ Canvas. So, but yeah, it's something I've been slowly toying with, is trying to wean myself out of sort of big ecosystems like the Adobe ecosystem, and the Mac ecosystem, to see what else is out there. And I think that's one of the things we're going to talk about today as well, right?
yeah, I think so. I mean, some of this it's a combination of hardware, software, the purpose you're using things for, and I suppose you have your I think it's great. We'll talk about the main things that we do, and when we can find a fit for that with these, this other way of meeting the need besides brand new stuff. But then there's always other jobs too, things that maybe a handy way to reuse this older stuff.
I'm excited about that too. I'm excited about what I can learn from you on that because I think this is something where you've tread more water than I have in this direction. So,
But we both have, so cool. I'm looking forward to your stories too.
okay.
All right. I'm not gonna.
But
I will
dang.
happily. Exactly. I'm deflecting. So,
All right. Well,
welcome. All right.
with that, maybe we should just like dive into the show, get
Mhm.
10,000, or rather on the ground. Here we go. Bam. Time to go on the ground. Uh, Practical application of this topic. Like, what does it look like when we're doing the stuff that we're talking about? Which is to say, refurbishing things, reusing things, exploring different ways of new use cases for old materials to keep them alive. It's like this. I have an iPhone right now, which is like the first phone I bought new in some time, and I felt a real heaviness about that.
Mm.
I didn't like buying a brand new because like the last couple I had were refurbished, and something felt really good about like, okay, I'm not putting anything into any landfills. I'm not putting like questionable chemicals into our ecosystem, right? I'm like, well, I am because I mean, I got this one, but you know what I'm saying? Like, there's something that feels good about recycling stuff too. Not to get too
Absolutely.
hippie.
Yeah. Minimizing waste. That's let's see, being conscientious with how we consume things. It's not like, well, hey, that whole technology aspect of humanity, I'll go ahead and opt out. I guess that's an option, but then I mean, how far do you go back? Because it's technology all the way down.
No
Because we're
wheels.
no wheels, no words, no pottery, no plumbing, no.
right.
I mean, where do you go?
Right.
Eventually, but there is something about that rapid turn cycle, like we were chatting about earlier. So where'd you want to start as far as examples?
Well, let's start with you,
All right.
because well, do you want to show the machine that you just recently refurbished?
Let's see. I'll do my best. I have to sort of tilt my camera and shout at my mic because
Okay.
it's so old. Its Wi-Fi isn't that reliable, but it works okay on when it's wired, and it's actually dialed into this Hangout to do screen sharing.
Wow, that's awesome.
So here we go. Tilt the camera. Um, it's an old like corporate Dell, right?
Hmm.
That it had its life. Someone probably carted this thing around, in their backpack or briefcase. Hopefully, like a really padded, nice backpack, because it would probably hurt your back carrying carrying it too much, or make you really strong. I don't know. Um, instead of carrying a sack of rocks, you can just put some Dells in there, and you got
Where
a
did you get
workout.
it? Like it's an
So
old. How old is it? First of all.
it's honestly, I have not fully dated. It's somewhere in like 6 to 8 years, whatever, right?
Okay.
Because this thing has had a hard life, and I couldn't tell you just instantly. So processor era and stuff, I probably could narrow it. Yeah, somewhere 6 to 8 years.
Okay.
It's probably not 10, but because I think the processor's too new for that. But it's it's like a Core i5.
Hmm.
So um, it's got, I think, technically, four cores for multi-threaded stuff. It is running the 64-bit version of Mint OS, and it's got like probably 2 hours of battery life. So it may have received a little bit of Frankensteining with like. So I got it from this place called Tech Discounts, and I think they take in sort of things that I call like a corporate fleet machine, and something where there's a standard for some company, some organization, they get a discount because they get a certain type of specific configuration of laptop. A lot of companies do this. They don't last forever. And at some point, typically on like a 4 year cycle, companies will say like, okay, you're still around, you got your computer, why don't you trade that in and we'll upgrade and whatever, right? So this is at least 4 years old, is my guess.
Okay.
And
Um,
and tech discounts would take that in, and I haven't done much diligence except explore their showroom, but it's kind of like a if you've been to like a used goods kind of store, I'm sure it would remind you of that. They've it's it's not that new of equipment, but some of it is slightly newer, and that's where the deals aren't that great. This was actually on the scratch and dent table, so I got it for like 130 bucks,
oh my gosh.
which I thought pretty fair, because if you wanted to go something new, you could go with a Chromebook, right? But a Chromebook had then it's like, well, um, is it running an Intel based processor, or is it running like
An
like
ARM
a like
processor?
an ARM processor, exactly? And so an ARM processor that changes what operating systems you can run on it and all that. And so puzzles trade offs. If you want something more general purpose, whatever. I could have probably gotten a new Chromebook for like 70, 80 bucks more, but it would have been hard to get it, to be as flexible of a thing as this little old beast.
I'm gonna capture that for the second section of the show, but um,
So that's some of the rationale as far as choosing this. Like literally, this wasn't me digging in my closet or thinking like, oh, there was that old machine. It was really curiosity, because I've heard good things about this company selling old machines, and they're a hybrid, like they're like two different organizations. One side of the house um, is not for profit, and so they're doing machines for people in need and whatnot, and then they have the other side of the house, which is just retail basically.
mm, here in town in Ann Arbor, we have the University of Michigan, and the U of M has a property disposition center where
Hmm.
same idea. They take a bunch of old equipment that the university has used and they resell it to the public for, I got like an external monitor for my drawing computer, right, for a
Oh,
reasonable
nice.
price. I forget what it was. It was under $100, right? Um, but yeah, yeah. So like, there's probably something like that somewhere near whoever's listening to this. If you have, whether it's like a reused tech center or if it is like a university, you know, property sort of recycling center, right?
Yeah, I do think that these places are fairly common, but there's it's worth digging around and looking, and some of them may have online presences where you could order or what have you, or maybe they have eBay stores. Lots of ways where things aren't limited to physical location.
Well,
So
that's true. Gazelle has
worth.
a service like that, right? Gazelle is that
Mhm.
electronics refurbishing, recycling service. Their stuff doesn't go back very far, and they mostly deal in Macintosh computers,
Mhm.
but they do have some interesting stuff there.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, places to if you have not the closet full of some kind of old thing, you can go get someone else's old stuff, and hopefully at a pretty darn good deal.
But it is astonishing how much old stuff you accumulate just after a couple of decades of doing this stuff. Like I found a box full of zip drives the other day, and I was like, oh, I bet there's some stuff on here that I'd actually want if I could get these things open. Now I got to figure out how to open them.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, so like a that reminds me of a old media that I found recently. Um,
Oh, you
mini,
actually have it on you?
yeah, mini discs. So a lot of
Oh
my
yeah.
yeah, so a lot of it's this was something that I would essentially make my own mixtapes, and also this is a recording mini disc. So I would like record jam sessions of like a what we weren't yeah, we were in a band, right? So I had a little band. I have a band a while back, and we were working on some songs, and also just part of our creative process was jamming and seeing what comes out. And this thing had such cheap storage for its era
Yeah.
and such great recording quality.
This would have
So
been like what, like 2000, 2001, that neighborhood?
yeah, I think I used this pretty solidly for about 4 years, right? So somewhere around 2000 through 2004.
Wow.
This thing had a quite a bit of use, and it's still in great condition. So,
Yeah.
but here it is. But I have this music that's kind of trapped. Like those recordings aren't anywhere else. They're just on these literal discs.
And there's no USB out on that thing.
There's no USB out, so I could
You have to do
do.
an
I need to
analog out.
exactly.
Oh, wow.
Well, technically it's digital, but it's optical, so it's not like you can't get the bits off of this. You can get really clear, lossless data off of it slowly.
Like when we used to record with our VCRs on the television or like tape to tape on a boombox.
Yes.
Okay, I want to back up. You mentioned that you put Mint OS on this Dell that you purchased. So
Yeah.
I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about Mint OS.
Okay. So, okay, Mint is a distribution of Linux. Linux operating system that came up in the 90s and became more and more usable as a desktop operating system in the early 2000s. And there are many distributions, they're called. So there's like different communities that form around building and maintaining. So essentially, different flavors, different operating systems that share some common DNA. So oftentimes, software that runs on one runs on another. So things like you've got Red Hat, you've got. I mean, I'm not going to do a great job listing them all. You've got Debian and Gentoo, and so these are typically like upstream. But what's interesting is like some of these OSs that are upstream are a little bit they're more for the it's like having a really an automobile you need to do a lot more maintenance and care of, right? But then it's almost like if you could take that automobile and wrap a friendlier one around it. And then like so downstream there's these easier, more, a little more polished for users of different levels of tech skill, right? Or just wanting convenience type users, like um, you know, even if you're really comfortable at the command line, maybe you want a great, user interface and some ease of use things like, I don't know, simple searching or what have you. And so you have these other distributions that wrap these ones up the chain. There's a really popular one that I think you've had experience with called Ubuntu, right?
Hmm. Yep.
And so, in fact, a while back, you mentioned escaping ecosystems. Right around 2007 or eight, like for about 2 years, my whole household we migrated from Windows to Ubuntu. But it was slowly needs from clients and stuff where it's like Photoshop, Illustrator, and it's like, okay, fine. And then we started. That's when we became a Mac and Ubuntu house, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so Ubuntu is pretty great. Um, it has its own flavors and quirks over the years. The look of its UI has gone away from the I don't know, a desktop that would remind you of sort of like Windows XP onward or what it and or Mac OS. It really took its own flavor. I think it's nice, but it also it it had some performance problems on like older machines when I tried it, right? So then I became more open and curious, right? Turns out there's one called Mint that it doesn't wrap one of those upstream, OSs. It actually is a custom version of Ubuntu.
Hmm.
So it really and like it really has a lot of widely adopted, supported, friendliness and availability of software because of that. And yet it has a little more, let's see, a little more. It has less problems with like slowdown and performance stuff with on older computers because it's not as demanding as Ubuntu has become on UI polish and whatnot. So let's see. I don't know if we've switched over to this one to the desktop that I
Oh, yeah.
downloaded.
Here, let me pull it up.
But I mean, here you go. You've got uh, like you would expect, sort of a lower left menu that you can search and like just use visual tools that you're familiar with to, browse the web, do office stuff. And of course, it's built on this very open ecosystem. So you have like a full office suite available with LibreOffice, right?
Mm.
Totally free. And various graphic solutions like Inkscape and GIMP, the GNU image processor, or image program. But so it's kind of like the equivalent of like Photoshop and Illustrator, but open style. Um, and then just a huge ecosystem of stuff that you can run and do. Um, let's see here. So like this is Inkscape, and you know, like as you would be familiar, you've got your shapes and tools and vector stuff you can make happen there. Back in the day, I designed business cards and websites and stuff with Inkscape. There's a lot of it's funny how some tools get reused for other purposes. Like there are different game engines that you can design levels in Inkscape, right?
Wow, really?
So yeah, and let's see. There's the good old there's things like of course your web browsers of choice. I mean you can run Firefox, you can run Chrome. There's note taking tools like Tomboy, so like little sort of post-it note wiki kind of things. A lot of friendly stuff. And then what's weird is like if as you're going about using your machine, and maybe this is a little more. We'll get into this more in 10,000 feet up. But you'll say, I wish something existed to help me, you know, track my address book or notes or do some home finance, and then you're going to find that it's a pretty robust ecosystem of software that's just free, and it's legally free to just you go to to either you use the visual interface, which is this software manager tool. You put in your admin password to get in there, but then let's see. And then once you're in there, you can visually browse and search. Do, do, do.
It has basically its own app store.
Yeah, basically. Oop. It looks like the old the old thing fell off the network. Are you seeing this anymore?
I am. It's still broadcasting your screen, strangely enough.
Wow. Okay, well that's cool.
I'm just impressed that you're on this old machine running Linux, you're able to do screen sharing too during a live hangout. That's pretty cool.
It's
Because like right now, I'm for like the screenshots when I do the Leaning to Artcast with you, I'm using my like really fancy new Vio Z canvas to do the screen sharing. Um, I could be using a different machine altogether. Something. Look at this, and you're drawing right now, doing a live drawing thing on the show. So you have this connected to a Wacom tablet.
I do, yeah. And another piece of old hardware that I never got rid of. This it's an Intuos 3 tablet. It's an oldie but a goodie, and like this thing just doesn't die, right? It's been carted around and used a lot, and it's quite a champ.
Wow. Now
So
I have been messing around with Inkscape a little bit because when I got my Windows machine, I mean, and this is like where I don't want to dig too deep into like software philosophy, but one of the things that I love about Clip Studio Paint is that when you purchase a license, you get a Mac and a PC license. So I'm like, hooray! How terrific that I can actually put it on whichever machine I happen to have, and I don't have to purchase a specific license. And if I migrate to a different system, I can take it with me. Whereas with Adobe products, not necessarily so. And I have, I spent a lot of money on a legal license for Creative Suite 5, Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, and what Dreamweaver, CS5. And when I got my Windows machine, I'm like, I don't really want to invest like that again in Adobe stuff. Let's break free. Let's use this as an opportunity to break free of that ecosystem. So I've been trying to learn Inkscape with the goal of using that to letter my comics for when I do published work, because publishers always want Adobe Illustrator files. Um,
oh, right on.
so if I could get like a layered SVG file that they can open in Illustrator, then I don't have to use Illustrator, right? How great would that be? little bit of a learning curve. Inkscape has its own interface, and I just need to sit down and spend some time with it. Is what it boils down to.
Yeah, it is a different approach. Here's the crazy thing. So let's say you had a concern about how something looked in Photoshop. Where do you go, right? I mean, so you can probably click on a support link somewhere, and now with this open ecosystem, you can find ways to reach out, help, join the team that makes this thing happen. So interesting, yeah, and more
What
food
do you
for
mean
thought
join the
for
team?
people.
Explain.
Join the team. There are volunteers making these apps, and some of them would be paid through different kinds of patronage arrangements through businesses that sell services wrapped around software, and then they pay to fund people to keep that software going while they then use it as a key asset that in whatever they're doing. So maybe um, maybe a creative company pays to keep a developer on that's helping keep Inkscape alive.
Mm.
Which I don't
Hmm.
know that but there are examples where this that arrangement exists.
Well, what I'm hearing in there too is these are groups of human beings who are accessible, and this isn't like a mighty corporation that you can send, um, you know, feature requests to that may or may not get collected. Well, let's say
Yeah,
they will, but like they're going to be in a big
almost
pot.
guaranteed nowadays. In the
Yeah.
days of social media, you probably can tweet at Adobe, no problem.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. However, I and other people have said publicly on Twitter, like, boy, Close Studio Paint, wouldn't it be wonderful if you had CMYK support? Please do CMYK support. That would be terrific if you had CMYK support. And I've yet to hear anything about CMYK support, Whereas if there was something like a patronage model for people who are doing open source, actually contributing to these things, it seems like there's more of a direct incentive, maybe. Or am I
Well, yeah,
inferring too
and at the
much?
very least, you're sharing a common belief and mission, especially if you're willing to somehow like help out, right? It's not
Right.
just swooping by a group of volunteers and saying, can you make it better? Uh, they'll probably look at you and you know
Yeah.
go back to what they were doing.
Hey guys, great product that you give me for free. Please do better. Uh, well, we've never heard that. Um,
Right. And yeah, so
so,
um,
um, do we want to take a break in a second and then maybe get to the other side of this and talk about some of like the more philosophical aspects of this stuff?
yeah, I think we're naturally getting there. It's just that there's a lot of. Do you have any other examples that you'd want to dig out, like the old stuff that you keep in use
Well,
or found a new life for?
see, this is where I'm excited to with you in the second half because this is a 2008
Yeah,
MacBook,
yeah, yeah.
which I was for a long time using this just as my classroom sort of presentation laptop with because it was running. Oh gosh, I don't even know. I don't even think this was running Lion on it. It was 10. I think it was running like 10.5 or something like that.
Hmm.
So finally realizing, and the last time I used it for drawing, I had a Wacom tablet hooked up to it, and this was like maybe 4 years ago, and I was trying to use Clip Studio Paint, but the back one was called Manga Studio 4, and it was crunching along, and Manga Studio 4 was like a pretty lightweight program. So I'm like, okay, I think your time has come, but I don't want to just get rid of you. Let's put Ubuntu on you and see if you can perform some other functions. Like, for instance, being a support machine for when I'm doing like shows. I can do presentations on it. I don't have to worry about loading a whole lot of stuff on it. But I only have just begun to play around with this so far. So I'm eager to hear like some of the use cases you've come up with for having a Linux machine in the house.
All right,
Um,
cool.
but the other one, just like to show off, if we're just showing off old gear, and this is like the oldest thing I think I've got, is this is actually Anne's laptop from college, 2001, 2001 iBook, 12-inch iBook. This thing weighs a ton,
Ooh,
man. Um,
wow,
and it's
that's
back when it was
amazing.
like the Adobe Garamond font, when it was actually called iBook, right?
Yeah.
Um, but the only reason we keep it around is because it runs OS 7. Remember OS 7? Um,
Wow.
no, OS 9. I'm sorry. It runs OS
Okay.
9 classic before it went to OS 10. And we have a CD-ROM of Sam and Max Freelance Police that, like, Anne just adores. And it's like, well, this is the only thing in the world we can play it on. So
That's funny. Sam and Max Freelance Police.
remember that game?
No, I've never played it. I mean, I know Sam and Max. I've seen clips here and there, but and it's really funny. But I have not.
This was remember the height of the CD-ROM boom in like the mid 90s where Lucasfilm was making like The Dig. Myst was a big deal. And so Sam and Max
Hmm.
was a mystery puzzle game where you take your two characters and you move around different locations trying to collect clues to unsolve the mystery of the story. So
Yeah, I'm really curious. So there's a store called Good Old Games, and I was trying to see. I found a lot of Sam and Max, uh, games on there, but not freelance police. I see Sam and Max Hit the Road, which was made in like 1993.
that was it. Sam and Max hit the road. Freelance Police was the name of their television show. I'm sorry. I'm mixing up things.
Oh, cool. Okay, interesting. So it is $6 on Good Old Games. So Good Old Games will take old games and wrap them to make them playable on new systems.
No.
Yes, yes. And for me, a game that just sort of
Wait a minute.
I just
Is it GOG.com?
GOG.com. Yeah. So super glad this came up. So Dungeon Keeper. That was a game that I'm like, how do I even play this anymore? And it just had so many little uh, delightful things about it. Where you ever play Dungeon Keeper?
No.
Oh, so
I love talking games with you. You get so excited.
so Dungeon Keeper, you're essentially protecting it's like tunnels in the ground as your evil lair that is meant to be safe from heroes who attack, but they inevitably break in, but then hopefully you've set up enough traps and have enough sort of minions and goons ready to go. And a lot of this is powered by managing and micromanaging these goons to like keep digging gold, keep get those rooms fortified and all this stuff. And you can it's like I don't it's just it's such a funny, silly, awesome micromanagey, um, yet still enjoyable kind of real time strategy thing.
Hmm.
And the delightful thing was at a certain cadence, you would hear the narrator say, "It is payday," and then all the goons would head to your treasure room and pick up a little bit of gold. And if you didn't have enough gold, that's things went wrong. Anyway,
Oh, it was enough to cover payroll.
exactly. So there you go. Anyway, and Good Old Games had my back, and that's how I was able to get a copy that runs on my new machine.
Crazy pants. So just to make sure I understand this right, I can look up an old game that I can't, that is on old media that I can't play anymore.
Yeah,
They will, if they have it in, if it's in their library, they will
yeah,
send me an updated version that will run on my PC or
yeah,
Mac.
yeah. And they're almost always. I think one of their big things is DRM free. So it's easy. You buy it from them, and you can install it on all your machines or whatever you'd like.
Oh, that's just that's what we call ethical. That's so
And
great.
that's what we call a free commercial. But what can you do? But here
Good
we
point.
are.
Good point. The heck you say? What else can I find at GOG.com?
So,
So, okay, but speaking of commercials, it's time for us to take a small break. And in
right
about
on.
1 minute and 30 seconds, we're going to talk about some of the ideas behind repurposing things and how do we decide what tech we're going to keep, what tech we're going to get rid of. Because I don't keep everything. Um, how do we hire these things to take on jobs? Do we get them to do what they had continued to do, or do we hire them to do something else? And if so, what? How do we decide what goes into that, right? But before we do that, we have to thank some people who make this show possible. And those people happen to be the folks who support us on Patreon at patreon.com/lean into art. And what is it? It's it's a way for you to give the show a vote once a month. And that vote can be as trivial as $1 a month. And if enough people do that, that makes the show more sustainable, pays us for our time that we put into making the show. You can do more than $1 a month, whatever you think you can afford. But we want to take this opportunity to thank 5 people who've been doing just that. First of all, thank you to Angela Mitchell. Angela can be found on Twitter at Angie Makes Stuff. Thank you, Angela, for believing in us and the stuff that we make. Also, Mike. Mike, we don't have a Twitter handle for you, but we appreciate your support and the fact that you believe in us and the stuff that we make. Ben Odgren. You can find on Twitter at Ben Odgren, Odgren. Thank you, Ben, for signing up for our Patreon and backing us and believing in us and what we do. Kelly Ishikawa. Kelly, you can find Kelly's work at Kelly of Ishikawa on Twitter. Thank you, Kelly, for supporting the show. And finally, longtime friend of the show, Becca Hilburn. Becca, you can find at Natho Soup on Twitter. Always running all sorts of great discussions on Twitter about storytelling and being a kid-lit author and an independent author. Thank you, Becca, for believing in us and the stuff that we do. Your support means a lot to us. And if you want to check it out for yourself, you can go to patreon.com/leanintart, where you'll find all the shows we produce, as well as shows that we make just for the leaners, just for the Patreon supporters, and their private discussions where you can interact with us in a safe place where the public cannot see. Only fellow leaners can see. So thanks to everybody who has been supporting us there.
Thank you very much.
Patreon.com/leanintart. All right. I'm going to go 10,000 feet up.
Yeah, let's go there.
Okay, how about... Oh, where did it go? Here we go.
3, 2, 1, contact.
I chose 2 Rob classics for this week. 10,000 feet up. What about... Okay.
So you were exploring like, how do we hire this old hardware for new jobs?
Right.
What
I kind of went a little bit there when I was talking about how I saw an opportunity to break from the Adobe ecosystem. Not that I dislike Photoshop and Illustrator. I have lots of experience with them, and I'm very comfortable with that software. So I wasn't necessarily making my life easier. It's just I wanted to have a lot of flexibility to jump from machine to machine to machine and not have to buy, okay, well, now I'm working on a Linux machine. I got to get my Adobe license for that. Now I'm working on my PC machine. I got to get my Adobe license for that, right? I wanted to be nomadic when it came to OSs.
Yeah, I mean that everyone's got something that, I mean, you have your own style, your own sort of needs, and that becomes like a wish list. And sometimes the tools and the conditions with that they're provided don't match. And so it's really challenging where people make this stuff. People put in time. People put in expertise. There needs to be some kind of trade, and that's where, I mean, if you look at like, GIMP, the image editor now, and you look at it like, 7, 8, 9 years ago, it doesn't look that much different. You look at Inkscape in similar time frame, it doesn't look that much different. Incrementally, things have improved and changed and evolved, and new capabilities have come in. But inherently, these projects are not funded in such a like robust way where people necessarily make this how they pay the bills and how they, feed themselves and the people they're responsible for. Right? It happens sometimes for some apps, some situations, some developers, but that's part of this puzzle where it's like this stuff comes from somewhere, and how does that work sustainably? Just casual observation that it seems like it works sustainably by being able to do similar jobs, but maybe not all of them, and maybe not being as up to state of the art in every single type of tool as fast as a tool that's funded by a large business, right? Or even just any size business that's successful, right?
Certainly.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's inherently underlying some of what you're describing, where it's like, we want this flexibility. We have you have tools that you like, and you want to, use them different places, but all of a sudden you have to deal with the terms that a company is using to protect what they make. And you can get this path leads eventually, I think it leads to, like on the extreme side of open source, there are ecosystems that are made of no proprietary software whatsoever. So Mint and like Ubuntu, they're kind of like this middle ground where it's like, yeah, I want to be able to see Flash. Yes, I would like to be able to use actual Google Chrome, right? Um, and so technically, the policies that keep that software alive, it isn't exactly fully as open as everything else in the open source ecosystem. But if you're willing to say, I'm okay with that, here you go. You got more flexibility. That wasn't exactly where you were going, but
No, but you're pointing out some of the complexity of the of that decision making process, right? Some of the stuff that's going on in the background when you're choosing these things, what you're buying into.
well, and so then you get a situation where some tools work like what is this called? There's like, oh, it's by Code Weavers company, and it's basically a little bit more refined version of an open tool called Wine. And so Wine can essentially a little bit like we described good old games. It essentially wraps some software that you're able to then run like it was a Windows app, and yet it can run on your Linux desktop, right? And so I'm curious if some situation some software like maybe old versions of Adobe tools that you have a license to, maybe that would you'd be able to wrap that and have it run good.
Interesting.
Maybe old versions or even current versions of uh, uh, the Clip Studio Paint type tools. I haven't tried it, but
Very interesting.
it's
Yeah, so
possible.
it's codeweavers.com is where we can find about wine, the
Yeah.
wine project. We'll link to that in the show notes too. Oh wow, that is an interesting idea. Um, okay, this might be a little bit on the groundy, but to back up a second, and when we talk about these machines, I want to talk about like what functions these things serve for you when you have some of these machines, but also, um, my iMac or MacBook rather that I put Ubuntu on. I remember talking to you months ago about how it runs kind of slow. It's a little bit sluggish, and you said drop an SSD or solid state drive into that thing.
Hmm.
Two questions. One, why is that such a big deal? And two, is it hard?
It is. Let's see. If you have some device that you can still connect to the internet and do research on, while this one is sort of on the operating table, it's not that bad because you can find lots of different support and how tos. There's actually, is it ifixit.com is a stunningly comprehensive resource for taking apart stuff, and especially if that stuff is computers and even phones. So that's where you could learn like, well, how do I replace my iPhone screen or battery? Like you can go to iFixit and they'll have guides, but then they also have guides like how do I replace the RAM on my old MacBook, my old MacBook Pro or whatever, and then even stuff like hard drives. So yeah, typically involves like a small Phillips screwdriver, or I don't remember if your model if you need a hex if you need the hex screwdriver, right? But like or the star, I'm not the hex, but the star.
Yeah, it's
Um,
down on the floor behind me. I'd have to dig it out from under the 7 pound iBook to get it out. But yeah, I got what you're saying.
so you need a car jack. It's not that 7 pounds isn't that heavy. I like making fun of old stuff because of I don't know.
Yeah,
It's so heavy.
I like how 2 pounds feels like a lot now.
It really does. It makes such a huge difference in your backpack.
It does. It
I don't know
really
how I
does.
carried a laptop before.
I don't know. Anne carried this thing around when we lived in Phoenix. So we like it's like 17 degrees. She's walking across parking lots with that thing in her backpack. How did she even live? Oh,
Wow.
amazing.
It is amazing. But I mean, we didn't know. So the let's see. So you were curious about the SSD. I would say it's not that difficult if you're comfortable with, unscrewing some stuff and unplugging some stuff and then replugging in stuff. The challenging part comes in the sort of restoring an operating system in there. So, and it depending on what you're trying to install, and it's I mean typically on a Mac you're able to so in the in the what in the EFI, um, sort of, it's kind of like a BIOS, if you've ever heard of that. It's like, well, what sort of software is in this computer when I hit the power button that tells the parts to start talking to it, to themselves, and just sort of is that basic, um, it's almost like the lizard brain of the computer, right? Keeps the computer's heart running and stuff. And you can ask it to boot to a different media, like boot to the CD, boot to this DVD, boot to this, thumb drive or whatever. And then, from there you install. And then that's essentially how I got Linux Mint on this Dell. And that's how actually I got a flavor of Ubuntu running on a slightly older Mac than the one you're describing.
Hmm.
So,
But why SSD?
well,
I'll
okay,
take it.
so yeah, why SSD? Okay, it doesn't spin. And so as such, there isn't this, as fast as spinning media has become. It's still not as fast as media that's instantly addressable. Of like, um, let's see, I guess it's the difference between asking your phone to call my friend. All right, that's like you're instantly calling up something from a place, and it's just a direct address kind of thing, and versus like, oh, I have to look up my friend's number, no, I have to dial it in or whatever, right?
Okay.
There's a little bit of more physical stuff happening on a spinning drive, traditional hard disk, than there is than where there's none of that on an SSD, and it makes them a lot faster,
Okay.
and like significantly faster, especially for that older hardware. It will feel not like a brand new race car fancy machine, but compared to what it was, it will be like, oh, this is quite useful.
Hmm.
And I have kept old systems, um, running for. I mean, I got about 8 years of life out of my. No, well, let's see. No, 6 years. I got about 6 years of life out of my 2008 MacBook, like prime time every day. There was one day at a client site where like my hard drive died, and I was like, well, I may as well put in an SSD, and it was like, boom, a new computer,
Okay, so
night and
this
day.
leads to the second question I wanted to dig at. Um, so you're just outright keeping it going as a daily driver, main workhorse machine, or are you finding another purpose for it now that you've brought it back to life?
So yeah, I mean that extended its life for a time, right?
Okay.
But now, I mean, still that is an old computer. It doesn't remain to feel newer, like over time. That was a few years ago when that incident happened. But then it can still perform other jobs. So like maybe you have a need for like a kitchen computer or a computer for your kids or a relative, or like, so it can become a gift or reuse or a different kind of, um, a different asset. Uh, where it's like, you know what, I'm going to travel with this computer instead of my newer one, where this feels less risky. Um, and I mean, there's a variety of jobs right there. Um, let's see. Oh, another example would be using it just for media consumption, or media storage and serving on your network. Like, if you have you ever used something called Plex?
Ah, yes, I know about this, but yeah, explain it for those who haven't never heard of this. I'll look it up while you.
So Plex is both a software that helps serve up your media, and it helps with with consuming it. So there are Plex apps that run on desktops, and also like on your phone or tablet, and that can consume content from a Plex server, and that can be stuff like your audio library that you happen to have downloaded, or it could be movies you've captured, that kind of thing, and it's meant to just serve that up. And that's a little bit of a deeper ecosystem thing too, because they've got an online service where technically they can sort of let you stream your media from your server to your app from anywhere on the internet.
Oh, what was that other one that was like Slingbox did that too?
Yeah, okay, that sounds familiar. I haven't investigated that one.
I think that was one of the ones where like you can watch your local TV anywhere. But
Yeah,
uh,
okay.
But yeah, but I've used Plex before with my Roku, where it's like, okay, we got the stuff running on a desktop in another room. All the media is on there. We just
Hmm.
call it up on our TV with our Roku.
Yep, exactly. And
But wait
then
a second, but you're talking
yeah,
about running Linux. Does this work with like
yeah.
a
So Plex, you can have yeah, Plex runs on Linux.
huh, that's great.
Yeah, I had there was a time during my independent consulting where this little netbook was my main machine. It was running Ubuntu, and this was right around 2010, yeah, 10, 11. And I would use this in my 1.0 iPad, and that was like my daily carry.
Wow. And I mean that thing looks like it weighs what, like a pound and a half maybe?
I kind of miss this little silly thing.
I don't want to
Yeah, it
fetishize
weighs
weight,
nothing. I don't
but
know. I-
no, but I mean I don't want to I don't want to turn into one of those people who's like thin and light is like the ultimate goal. But there is something to be said for like because that thing looks like it can really take a hit and it's super lightweight.
for sure lightweight. I'm not sure about the hit, but yeah.
Really?
So yeah, this is an old Acer Aspire one, and I went straight from I didn't I think I might have booted up to Windows once, but then I just replaced it with Ubuntu. And uh, this thing started to feel it started to I never put in an SSD in this thing, and so that's actually tempting now I'm saying this out loud. Uh, that's a good idea. So I probably could get another life out of this as a little portable Linux machine, and I think I should do that. But like, instead, what I did for a time is this was my Plex server. So
Gotcha.
I just had an external hard drive hooked up to it, and it just was a little champ serving stuff up.
So, okay. Another thing I've been thinking about looking into, like I got time, but this could be a whole nother Leonard episode is where we talk about like finding time for like new pursuits. Um, Galaxy Note 10.1, which we've talked about in the show years ago. I still have mine. And it's get a little bit slow, a little bit laggy. A lot of Android services running in the background that I have to keep on shutting off. Stop doing that. Stop pinging that. I just want to use this thing as a drawing tablet. As I've been playing with it, I'm like, if I had a Chromecast with me and then this tablet, this could be my teaching rig, right? Because I could do my drawing demos. Because I teach, like right now, a lot of my drawing classes at the Art Center, when we do digital drawing, we're doing a lot more with Metabang Paint, which is on Android, right? So now I'm thinking about like, well, I wonder if I should look for, a different ROM to flash onto this thing.
That's a good idea. I do not know because I have an old Galaxy. What was it? Galaxy
Galaxy Note 10.1.
Note 10.1. Yes, I have. I bought one as well.
Yeah.
Same era, and it's for me. It's I don't have a good solution. I went. Let's see. It was at a convention I was at last year. I used it for demonstrating Guitar Fretter. I think where it was like, hey, this is a machine I'm not that worried about. I mounted it on a little arm on my table, so it was easy for folks of different heights to interact with it. And I wasn't, it's a lower, it's like a travel machine. It's a lower risk machine. I'm not using my iPad Pro right there.
Mm-hmm.
So
See, like that's what I'm like I want a drawing version of that old netbook that you were showing, right? The Acer Aspire. I want something like that I can like I'm not worried about like and the nice thing about the Ubuntu machine too is like none of my personal stuff is on this thing, right? So I don't have to worry about if it gets captured, if it gets taken away. What's it got? I don't even store my browser history on the thing, right? So that's another thing I like about it. It feels safer traveling with something like that.
that's a really good point.
So
And I wonder, I guess that's an open question. And by all means, if any of the leaners out there are familiar with different OSs that are runnable on that would love to hear about it. Or maybe we end up just kind of tweeting about it and share
yeah.
what we figure out.
Yeah, that's something that's been like it's been a very slow burn investigation on my end. It's like here and there, like just before bed, I'll do a little bit of searching on it. But if I discover anything, I will let people know because yeah, I'd love to breathe new life into that thing. Um, okay, I think we're coming up on final thoughts time. Do you have anything that you want to bridge us over for the final ad spot?
Yeah. So let's see. There's oh man, there's just so many different. I think we could revisit the question of keeping the open source thing going, and then like maybe like the why, the little bit of why and how as far as keeping it going, because it's there really is kind of a feeling when you're in this and you're using it, and it'd be neat to
Okay, yeah.
put a couple more thoughts together about that.
Yeah, and I want to hang something on that too, this idea of like open source is a two-way street.
Hmm.
But I'm not a developer. So how the heck do I give back outside of financial compensation? What else? How else do I keep this ecosystem healthy? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what we'll close with some thinking on that. But before we do that, so we'll do that in about a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes. Before we do that, we got to thank some other people who make the show possible, and those people happen to be us. We make stuff. This is the part that I promised in the beginning of the show where I said we're going to talk more about the stuff that we make. I said I'm a cartoonist and teaching artist, which is to say a person who makes comic books and teaches people how to make comic books. I teach classes, which we'll talk more about in a second, but I also make comics. And the comic that I hope you will check out if you haven't already is Boulder and Fleet at boulderandfleet.com. What is it? It's a comic about a bear and a bird who are best friends. The bird is very ambitious. She wants to be the greatest adventurer the world has ever known and reap all the rewards therein. And her partner and best buddy is this big, super strong bear who has one shortcoming, if you want to call it that, as an adventurer, is that he hates fighting. So how do you go on adventures and slay monsters and rescue people if you don't like throwing a punch? Well, that's what the comic's all about. And you can read it for yourself at boulderandfleet.com. And there's even a Patreon. It's at patreon.com/Jersey if you want to see some behind the scenes stuff and some in-process stuff as I gear up for the next Boulder and Fleet story. Rob, you make a game.
I do, and it's called "This Panda Needs You." And you're like, "Hey, I'm busy. What does this panda need me for?" You know what? Fair enough. This panda has this whole delightful world, very mellow, calm game, but yet pulls you in because there's pattern matching and problem solving. And what happens is a panda comes along, and there's a set of blocks stacked up with physics, right? Physics and colors, different shapes. And here they are. Everything's neat, great, tidy, until a cloud comes along, boom, knocks it all down. Okay. And now this panda needs your help putting it back to the way it was. And it starts out really easy and approachable. And as you start putting things right, the panda is celebrating with you. You make a panda dance and celebrate what you're doing. That's good feedback. Feels awesome. And this there's like over 50 levels of that kind of puzzle solving action that gradually get more challenging. And you can learn more about it at this-panda.com, or of course search for it in the iTunes App Store, which it's available now for iPhone and iPad. And search for This Panda Needs You.
And if you do get the game, a great thing you could do is give it a 5-star review in the App Store. That helps more people find the game. It raises its rankings in search. And you can also recommend it to a friend. There's like this cool sharing thing in all the iOS apps to say, hey, if your kids played this panda, because this panda needs them too. So, but
that.
if you are not as interested in the stuff we make and more interested in the way we think about stuff, fair enough. The show is a product that we make as well, and we have video workshops that are sort of like done in one versions of the show, where it's actually more of an instructional thing. There's a couple
Mhm.
classes in there about comics that are based on activities that I've been using in my classroom for, oh my gosh, it's been almost a decade, Rob. I just found some old materials from a teaching gig that I did in 2007.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
yeah, I get crazy, right? 10 years of teaching. But then Rob, you've got workshops in there too. You've got some storytellers UI tools, making video games from your comics, and even turning jokes into comics. Laughing Yeti, Monkey Spaghetti. These are all available at leanintoart.com/workshops. And we thank everybody who has downloaded the workshops. If you have done so and you're like, look, I've interacted with all your stuff, what else can I do? If you're watching the video on YouTube right now, you can give it a thumbs up. That helps raise our rankings. And if you're listening to the show on a podcatcher like iTunes or whichever, Overcast, giving the show, go to the directory of shows and give the show a 5-star rating. That helps more people find the show too. The more people find the show, the more people can support us, the more this thing becomes a sustainable endeavor. And we thank everybody who's done that too. All right.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right.
Ready?
So
Final thought
yeah,
time.
final thoughts, closing thoughts about the two-way streetedness of this whole open source thing. How do you go about participating if you're like, well, wait a minute, I don't know how to code, or um, or you're not sure, like with whatever you're, you know, you've got a lot of skills, but if you're like, well, I'm a writer, or I'm a storyteller, I'm a visual artist, I'm a or I code, but I don't probably code in the language they use to build that thing. I do web pages in JavaScript, So what can I do really?
Right. That's a fair question.
Uh, every single skill that you could bring, even like using a tool and providing feedback, is valuable to open source apps. And most projects have some affordance for saying like, "Hey, I found a misspelling. Hey, um, you know what? In honestly, when if you're ambitious, you could say, I found a misspelling, and I actually submitted a change in your source code." And if that sounds crazy pants, there's places to learn how to do this that encourage you. And I haven't gone through the lessons in particular, but I subscribe to their newsletter, and I've heard enough great things about them. There's an organization called Free Code Camp, and they will. Honestly, the rabbit hole there gets very deep. But there's many great lessons in there that you can pick to learn and adapt and accomplish whatever you want, including being guided with how to participate with open source projects, and and in sort of help those kinds of organizations. And of course, I mean, there's donations, but then there's like um, ways that you could donate to a particular project. I know you said like besides money, but like the money helps too, right? So there's also an organization in particular that's amazing for the whole, honestly, the whole internet. Everything that is out there is whether it's software and technology that we use, and the hardware and the rules and the patents behind it and all this stuff. There's an organization that tries to keep things fair called EFF, and
Electronic Frontier Foundation.
yeah, and it's worth supporting them, or tuning in to the kind of things that they care about and do.
And that's EFF.org.
Hmm. Other couple things. Perhaps you speak a second language. Perhaps English is your second language. Whatever, right? Like that's translation is a big area to participate as well. So, and very lower hurdles as far as technical stuff.
I can also see somebody like me who's a cartoonist even offering to say like, and this is by no means trying to say like go out and do free work, but in exchange for if I don't have the actual cash, but if I have like extra time that I can do labor trade, saying like, okay, I've gotten a lot of value from your stuff. How about I create like a comics instruction manual for your software? What are like the 5 big points that you wish people would understand more clearly how to use your software? Um,
Oh my
let's see if we can
gosh,
make that clear visually.
that would be pretty fantastic.
Right. And like limiting it like that would be a way that I would put parameters around. Is like I would ask them like what are the 3 to 5 pain points that you wish that you have the most difficulty explaining to your users on how to use this thing. So I can show how to do that or make a metaphor for how to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's not the sort of, well, hey, aren't there some isn't there someone present here that is like making a ton of, like, chances are nobody is making this unfair amount of money off of that software. So like you're truly just you're making a trade giving back, and that's not a kind of gross like for exposure kind of arrangement.
Right. And that's also where you're giving them the choice to even accept it. I'm not saying like I would go and say like, hey, I made a count for you because your instruction manual sucks. And I'm here to tell you.
That's right. The presentation matters a lot.
The way you ask.
Exactly.
Well, that's great. I think we just had some a nice walk around reusing stuff and using open source stuff, Rob. Don't you?
Yeah, I think it was fun to finally talk about this, and who knows, maybe we'll chat about it again. Would love to hear what sorts of reuse and new life from old technology and stuff that the leaners have done as well.
Sure. Yeah. Justin Connolly was here in the chat, and they said, "I love finding use for old gear. What gear?" love to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll have some, throw out some mentions of stuff, ways to reach out to us. The big one right now for me is Instagram, which I'll mention in a second.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then, yeah, lots of ways to reach out to us, especially if you join us on Patreon. That'd be a place to talk with us privately too. All right. So thanks, Rob, for suggesting this topic.
Oh, my
Fun.
pleasure. Thank you, Jersey. It's a lot of fun. And, like I suspected, you had lots of examples of it as well. It was fun.
All right. Well, the show is recorded every Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. We broadcast the show live on Google Hangouts, and then we collect it as a podcast the next day. So you will find it on patreon.com/lean into art. You will find it on all of your favorite podcatchers and again on the YouTube as well. So until next time, I have been Jerzy Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jerzy Drozd on Instagram.
And I have been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and also Rob Stenzinger on Instagram.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
Okay, I'm going to shut off the live stream. Thanks again for hanging out with us, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.